Supergirl is a comic book character with a very iffy film history. So with the release of the newest attempt at a Supergirl story, I wanted to look back at the major Supergirl adaptations and see which ones are the best, and if any are even good. And while there are only 2 movies called Supergirl, she's been heavily featured in the 5 movies that we're ranking on this tier list. So let's start with the very first attempt.
Get that garbage out of here!
Supergirl. The 1984 version. I have long heard that this film was bad, but I honestly wasn't sure just how bad it actually was. Let's start with the story and pacing, because that part of the movie was absolutely painful. The basic gist of the film, if you haven't seen it, is that Kara was goofing off with this ball, which so happens to be the power source for Argo City, where she lives. She loses the ball, which leads to Argo City being destroyed. So she takes a vessel to go to Earth to find the missing thingamajig. This story setup would be all fine and good, but the pacing lacks any sense of urgency or stakes. Supergirl spends most of the film dicking off by either sneaking into the school, or making new friends, or using her heat vision to make flowers bloom. Wait, what? It at times genuinely feels like she completely forgets the reason she's here in the first place. And the whole threat of her city dying is never felt in the film at all, because Kara winds up preoccupied with saving Earth from the movie's villain in her scheme. But we'll talk about that nut job in a second, don't you worry. Until Kara finds out that the villain has the orb she needs, he spent a lot of time with her in this romance plot that blossoms. But both her characterization and her romance story aren't all that great. Kara doesn't really have a character arc in this movie at all, not even really an attempt at one, and that's largely due to the fact that I don't even think she has much of a character. Despite Helen Slater doing the best she could with the material given, I just don't think she was given any material. Kara is consistently flat and boring and lifeless. I don't know how she feels about anything or what she wants unless the movie directly tells us through dialogue. She's not a character for young kids to imprint on because she's not really a character. And the only real story she gets is a romance arc, which is one of the worst romances I have ever seen in a movie, maybe ever. She falls in love with a guy named Ethan, and the circumstances around this love are so bizarre and honestly, a little rapey. The villain of the movie is smitten with a guy and she wants him to be smitten with her. So naturally, she makes a love potion that only works so long as his spider stays in the shell. And once the potion is activated, he'll instantly fall in love with the first person he sees. The villain loses track of Ethan, leading to a scenario where she uses this piece of heavy machinery to get him back. Also, just a side note, he absolutely looked at people during all of this, so he probably should be falling in love with one of these random dudes by now. Supergirl saves him, transforms into her secret identity, and Ethan falls in love with Linda Lee. Later on, Ethan goes on and on about how much he loves Linda, and I guess for some reason Supergirl is receptive to this, and so she falls in love with this guy who non-consensually fell in love with her. Whoever wrote this story had to be on drugs because oh my goodness, why? Also, it's really odd that this isn't the only time a female superhero had a non-consensual relationship with a male love interest. I'm looking at you, Wonder Woman 1984. But now let's talk about the person who started this awful romance, the villain Selina. She is not a serious villain in any way, shape, or form. Her entire motivation until the end of the movie is Ethan, and when she can't get him, she randomly decides to start a fascist regime over this small town. Why does she do this? I don't know, and I don't really think anyone else knows either. But yeah, Selina lacks any presence, she's poorly written, and she's entirely forgettable. But something that is not forgettable is how bad these action scenes are. All these sequences feature unfinished, awful effects, and they're also very slow and low energy. The scene where Supergirl has to fight these truckers is slow and unintentionally hilarious. Kara's escape from the Phantom Zone is absolutely hideous. And then of course there's the final fight that I already showed where Kara gets stretched. And instead of doing actual stretching effects, they just stretch the footage and it looks like poop from a butt. Now at this point in a review, I would typically list off some things I liked about a bad movie like this. But instead, I'm just gonna list off some individual dumb things that made me laugh. When Kara gets to Earth, she flies out of the pod wearing the Supergirl costume. Even though this wasn't her pod, this was Zoltar's. This implies that Zoltar intended to wear this costume. We see a poster of Christopher Reeve's Superman, and I'm reminded by the fact that he chose not to be in this movie. And he did Superman 3 and 4, so that should show you how bad this movie is. And in the Phantom Zone, Zoltar keeps offering Kara this.
Zoltar!
Squat.
Overall, Supergirl is one of the worst superhero films of all time. It's laughably terrible in every single aspect, and it absolutely has to go in D tier.
Something's in my ass!
Superman/Batman Apocalypse, because I guess calling it Superman and Batman was just too much work or something. This is one of those random DC animated movies I've always seen around, but never took the time to actually check out. I generally enjoy DC animated movies, and maybe someday I'll do a video where I cover all of them, But this one is okay. It's not terrible by any means, but it does have some very serious flaws. And we'll get to those, but I first want to talk about what I think works best about this movie, and that is Supergirl. Supergirl is by and large the best written character of this entire film. She has a very strong character arc of choosing her own path. Early on, she crash lands on Earth and is jerked around by Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. Each of them want her to live a specific life or follow specific rules because either Batman doesn't trust her or Wonder Woman thinks she can't control her powers or something like that. And once Darkseid abducts her, she loses all agency completely. It becomes a mindless slave to fulfill Darkseid's will. But after she's rescued and is confronted by Darkseid one last time, she realizes who she wants to be on Earth. She wants to be a hero like her cousin. She wants to be Supergirl. And her giving Darkseid the business is one hell of a way to visually show her character growth. While I think Kara is extremely well written as this film's lead character, the supporting cast is iffy at best. We also follow the DC Trinity: Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. And while they do get some development, it's not the most crazy development in the world. Batman goes from not trusting Kara to trusting her. This doesn't reflect a big change in his character or outlook. He only changed his views on one specific person. He's still a deeply mistrusting individual, but at least Batman still has a sense of humor sometimes.
Your cousin just torched $50,000 worth of custom hardware.
Send me the bill.
On a reporter's salary. Right.
Superman doesn't change at all. He starts out supporting Kara, and he ends supporting Kara. And Wonder Woman gets nothing. She really doesn't have any development at all. And there's actually one example of really poor writing for her character that made me scratch my head. Early on in the film, she jumps Superman and Kara from the shadows and tries to kidnap her, who of course lasers her surroundings. And then Diana had the gall to say this:
What if this had been the middle of the day, the park crowded with people, children?
Excuse me, ma'am. She wouldn't have lasered anything if you didn't try to sneak attack her. Big Barda is another character who's part of this adventure, and I think she's the runner-up in terms of writing. She has a moment where instead of giving in to her apocalypse upbringing and killing Granny Goodness, she spares her. That was a nice moment and a solid piece of character development for a niche DC character who absolutely should be in more things. Please, James Gunn, give us a Big Barda and Mr. Miracle movie. The world needs it. The animation of Superman/Batman Apocalypse is exceptional. I really enjoyed this era of DC animation. All the films looked really good, and I miss when 2D animation was the standard. And the animation also helps to make the action stand out so much. I won't say these are all incredibly memorable, but the Doomsday Army scene was solid, as is the fight between Wonder Woman and Big Barda against the Furies. But really, the standout is of course Darkseid versus Superman and Supergirl. This fight is brutal, jaw-dropping, and has an actually effective jump scare. What a real standout moment from this film. Also, this is where this meme comes from, by the way. The overall story and pacing of Superman/Batman Apocalypse can be hit or miss at times. Also, as I mentioned, the character writing isn't the strongest, and the villains aren't exactly multi-dimensional. But there is one truly excellent scene, and that's the one where Batman stands up to Darkseid and says, "My brain's bigger than yours." He armed all of Darkseid's bombs and said he was gonna blow his clean off if he didn't let Supergirl go. Amazing moment, easily the best of the film, but still, I can't put Superman/Batman Apocalypse any higher than B tier. Legion of Superheroes. This is one of the movies I was really looking forward to checking out in this video. The Legion of Superheroes is kind of a niche subset of DC characters, and we really don't get too many stories about them. But unfortunately, the final product wound up being very generic, bland as 4th of July mac and cheese, and wholly unimaginative. If you've seen at least like 10 movies, you can very easily predict different story beats of Legion of Superheroes. Every aspect from the main character's character arc, to the villain reveal, to how the events of the story unfold. The script is just a jumble of tired ideas and cliches. Kara's character arc is exactly what you expect it to be. In the beginning of the movie, she's struggling on Earth. After losing her home, she's not acclimating to the new environment both as a civilian who's trying to hide her powers, but also as a superhero who's trying to not cause too much damage. She doesn't have her place, and you guessed it, her story is all about finding a place where she belongs. And that place is the future! And while in the future, she makes friends, falls in love, lets go of Krypton, and blah blah blah. It's the most basic story ever, and it doesn't progress in any interesting or inventive way. And there are other predictable and boring story elements too, like the reveal of Mon-El being the secret villain of the film. I think everyone can see that coming a mile away. In the beginning, he's like the most goodest guy ever, so of course he's secretly evil. And the main villain of the film is of course a reborn Prime Brainiac. Oh boy, who could have seen that coming? The movie where a good Brainiac is a good guy has to have off the bad Brainiac as the villain. And it's not just the story elements themselves that are terrible, it's the fact that the movie does them without adding any spice, any seasoning. It chooses the most bland milquetoast way of introducing these different story elements. But while the story suffers, I actually do think the characters are solid. Despite Kara's story being entirely generic and overdone, I do think this version of the character is enjoyable to watch. She has a lot of personality, and I like her scenes with the other lead character, Brainiac 5, who, speaking of which, is also pretty enjoyable. He is kind of a typical good character from an evil heritage who's trying to do good, but both him and Kara have this enemies to lovers story that I actually did get invested in. What can I say? I mean, they have a lot of chemistry. It's kind of cool that they're connected from the shared feeling of being outcasts, and this was the most compelling aspect of the movie to me. And some of the other characters are also pretty cool, like the whole roster of losers that are their classmates. The standouts are probably Bouncing Boy, Phantom Girl, and the guy whose arms fall off. We also get a few scenes of DC heroes we're all familiar with, like The Flash, Batman, and Superman. This is the first time I've heard Jensen Ackles' voice for Batman, and all I'll say is keep him away from that character. His delivery is so flat and lifeless. I don't know what he was cooking, but it's now burnt. And Superman is voiced by Darren Criss? That's Harry frickin' Potter. What's he doing here? He's gotta get back to Hogwarts with witches and wizards and magical beasts. To goblins and ghosts and magical feasts. Did you get it? Did you get the joke? But he's a solid Superman, and maybe someday I'll watch his Superman movie. But now I want to talk about one last thing about Legion of Superheroes. The animation.
Now the main problem area is up here.
Yeah, I really just don't like how this movie looks. The animation is sometimes really choppy, the character models can look extremely goofy, and I just don't like the art direction with the harsh outline around the characters. I much prefer the animation style of Superman/Batman Apocalypse. And the action is also entirely forgettable. There's not one memorable sequence or cool fight scene, it's just entirely mush and nonsense. So yeah, I'm really not the biggest fan of Legion of Superheroes. This had potential to be a really good film, but it lacks any sort of depth. And while the animation here is matching the animation of the rest of the DC Tomorrowverse, it doesn't mean I have to like it. So I'm gonna have to put Legion of Superheroes in C tier.
Wait a minute!
The Flash. Okay, I know this movie isn't necessarily about Supergirl. She is for sure not the main character like how she is with the other 4 movies in this video, but this movie does feature the second ever live-action cinematic Supergirl, so how can I not talk about it in the Supergirl video? But with that said, The Flash is actually terrible. So much worse than I remembered it being. Holy hell. For starters, this has to be the ugliest movie I've ever seen in my whole life. Every single frame is a genuine offense to the idea of cinema, and it's made even worse by the unpolished CGI. The scenes where the Flash is going super fast, or going back in time, or in the Chrono Ball featured the worst rubber people CGI I have ever seen. And the excuse that it's supposed to look this way is not a good defense. Just because someone craps on a canvas and calls it art doesn't mean it's anything more than crap. And the whole final battle is the dullest, most artificial superhero final battle maybe of all time. It's just a gray field with nothing special to it at all. I know it's like beating a dead horse at this point, but The Flash seriously is just ugly. And the script is nothing better.
So, back in the day, jingle, 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 back in the day, before the back rooms were a thing, okay? Jingle, jingle, pay attention.
The story of The Flash is almost good. Barry Allen's father is about to go away for good for his mother's murder, so Barry decides to go back in time to save her, creating a whole new timeline where everything is worse and now Kevin Bacon stars in Top Gun instead of Tom Cruise. Truly, the worst timeline. But throughout the movie, Barry and the other Barry try to save this universe because it's the one where their mother is alive. But things go wrong, and no matter how many times they go back, they can't save everything. This is basically just the Flashpoint story if you didn't already know. So Prime Barry realizes the error of his ways and makes himself unsave his mom, to let her die and let things go the way they're supposed to. And that scene is genuinely heartbreaking and effective. This story works exceptionally well. Except Barry then immediately decides to change the past again. It's incredible how effectively they undid the entire movie we just watched. Barry didn't learn anything. He didn't actually have a character arc. And saving his dad absolutely did have ramifications, because Ben Affleck Batman was completely erased and replaced with George Clooney. What the hell? But even outside of those big things, there's still so much about this film that just sucks. Michael Keaton's Batman returns, and while he's always cool, I can't really say he's well written. He doesn't have much of a character story, and there are some moments where he is poorly written. Like when him and the Barrys go to find Superman, but they only see Supergirl, he says,
"It's not him. We've got to go."
What do you mean Batman was just gonna leave an innocent girl imprisoned? Why would you write him like this? And there's also Sasha Kaya's Supergirl. I think she's absolutely a bright spot in this movie, even if she isn't that great. The performance is pretty solid, but her character arc of choosing to fight for Earth was incredibly rushed, and for sure felt like an afterthought, but she did have unlimited drip. I mean, come on. I wish she had more presence in the film, partly because it would make this movie's presence in this video make more sense, but also because I much preferred watching her over Ezra Miller's Barry Allen. Yeah, I just could not vibe with their performance. I don't like this panicky, Quirk-Chungus version of the character, and all the spooky real-life stuff with Ezra Miller just makes his performance even worse in retrospect. But let's wrap up this segment by talking about the final terrible thing in The Flash, the multiverse nostalgia trip, where we see Nicolas Cage Superman, Christopher Reeve Superman, Helen Slater Supergirl, and Adam West Batman, and more. I still can't stomach how terrible both the idea and the execution of this was. We don't need to see the CGI corpses of actors who've passed. And why on God's green earth would you ever CGI over Nicolas Cage? That alone makes this movie completely unforgivable.
That was all. I don't think it was AI. I know Tim is upset about AI as I am. It was CGI. Okay, so that they de-aged me and I'm fighting a spider. I didn't do any of that.
The Flash is going in D tier. What an awful movie. But before we move on to the newest Supergirl movie, I just want to say we are on the road to 1 million subscribers. And once we reach that goal, I'm releasing a video where I cover every single Adam Sandler movie. So if you want to see that monstrosity of a video, make sure you're subscribed. But now, let's move on to...
I just think they're neat.
Supergirl. Maybe one day there'll be a new movie that doesn't start a blood war online. But until then, Supergirl is the latest film that has been attacked online even before the film released. But now that it has released, I have to be honest and say, it's not that bad. I don't know where these horrible reviews are coming from, but I honestly found Supergirl to be an enjoyable experience. Let's start by talking about the characters and the casting. Millie Alcock as Kara Zor-El is absolutely phenomenal. She's able to give so much depth through her performance and really present this damaged, hurt character who's trying her best to hold on. This version of the character is harboring a lot of trauma after losing her family and her planet, and Millie imbues that trauma into every scene she has. And we'll talk about her character arc in a second, but again, Millie is properly able to express each phase a character has on this journey. Eve Ridley as Ruthie is solid, absolutely no complaints with the performance. The character is pretty one note for most of the film, and her character arc is so closely tied to Kara's that it at times feels like she doesn't even have a character arc, but again, I'll talk about that story beat in a second. Jason Momoa as Lobo is freaking fantastic. The Aquaman casting was perfectly fine, but he was born to play Lobo. His role in the movie isn't very extensive, he kind of just shows up every now and then, but still, whenever he was on screen, he absolutely stole the show. And then there's the villain of the movie, Krem.
You like it?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Come on, let's go next door and get your mom a funny refrigerator magnet.
Yeah, I don't know why they went with this design. He just looks way too edgy, which honestly offsets how genuinely depraved and evil he is. A lot of people online are calling Krem one of the worst comic book villains of all time because he lacks depth. But I would argue that he doesn't need and honestly shouldn't have depth. This isn't really a spoiler, but Krem is a PDF file.
I'm Chris Hansen.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
His whole motivation is kidnapping young girls to replace his race's dwindling population. We don't need a sob story to explain why he's the Jeffrey Epstein of outer space, because he's just a monster through and through. And as a monstrous villain, I think he is effective. He constantly keeps the main heroes on their toes. He's absolutely ruthless. And I'm not saying Krem is a super compelling villain who's the best of all time or something like that, but he's also not nearly as bad as people online have been saying. The other super controversial aspect of this movie is the visuals, but I would say most of the time, the movie does actually look good. It makes good use of lighting and the environments and the mixture of practical sets and CGI, but the biggest problem with the movie and the biggest visual problem is the whole final battle sequence. That segment of the movie did actually look like butt, and I don't know what happened. Super artificial green screen, odd music drops, and overall wasn't as effective as the rest of the movie. I understand why a lot of people left the movie with a sour taste in their mouth because of that final battle sequence. And now I want to talk about the bigger story and the message behind Supergirl, and why I think this movie is actually really good. Kara has this beautiful story of realizing that she doesn't have to be perfect to be good. She pushes herself away from Superman and Earth because she doesn't see herself as his equal, because of how perfect he is. She's messy and broken, has had a really rough life, but she accepts those parts of herself to inspire Ruthie to not follow in her footsteps. Even though Kara is imperfect, she can still do good. Even though she isn't nice, she can still be kind. And even though she doesn't fit the standard, she can still be herself. It's a really good message for kids, teens, and even adults. And it's also a very unique superhero story that I haven't seen before. So while the movie can visually look kind of rough, and the villain looks horrible, the movie remains completely fun, energetic, and full of heart. Supergirl isn't quite an S tier movie, but it's a very strong A tier. And that's my ranking for every Supergirl movie. And while I really enjoy some of these movies, I still don't think we have a truly excellent Supergirl film yet. But if you enjoyed this video, why not hit that subscribe button? And also check out this video here because I'm sure it's one you'll enjoy.